The ground beneath your feet is a hidden archive of forgotten time. This journey explores 20 fossilized footprints that directly challenge the established timeline of human history. By the end, you will see our entire past through a startling new lens. What if our earliest ancestors walked in Europe millions of years before science says they could? And how did humans reach the Americas far earlier than any textbook claims? What does a single step preserved in the mud tell you about the true story of us all? That archive of forgotten time opens with a scene of startling intimacy. 3.6 million years ago, in what is now Tanzania, a light rain fell upon fresh volcanic ash. Two individuals, members of the species Australopithecus afarensis, walked across this soft, damp surface. The larger one placed its feet with care, the smaller matching its steps, perhaps walking side by side or directly in the leader's tracks. Then the sun baked the ash to stone, sealing this quiet moment for eternity. When Mary Leakey's team uncovered these prints in the 1970s, they were looking at the oldest unequivocal evidence of bipedal walking in our family tree. The emotional impact was profound. Leakey herself called it a moment frozen in time, a direct connection across millions of years, but the scientific impact was even more revolutionary. These were not the shuffling, awkward steps of a creature just learning to stand up. They were deliberate, balanced, and efficient. The footprints show a pronounced heel strike, a rolling motion across a distinct arch, and a push off from the toes, a gait pattern strikingly similar to our own. This was not a prototype. This was a refined mode of travel. The discovery presented a beautiful paradox. Here was proof of a fundamental human trait, walking upright, appearing in a brain and body we still consider primitive. It forced a dramatic rethink. Bipedalism, the very foundation of our humanity, did not emerge slowly as a clumsy afterthought. It was there, fully formed, far deeper in our past than anyone had dared to speculate. The implications ripple outward. Walking this way frees the hands for tool use, for carrying, for gesture and communication. It suggests a social world. The Laetoli trackway, with one individual carefully following another, hints at connection, at companionship, perhaps even at the simple, ancient concept of family. So we are left with a profound question from these first pages of the archive. If the mechanics of being human were established so early and so elegantly, what does that say about everything else we assumed came later, about the mind behind those graceful steps? The answer may lie in tracks found on an entirely different continent, in a place no one thought our ancestors could possibly be. That quiet moment on a Tanzanian plain was just the first chapter. Now the story takes a sharp and deeply unsettling turn, transporting us from the heart of Africa to the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean. On the Greek island of Crete, another set of prints was discovered pressed into rock that once formed a sandy Miocene coastline. But these footprints carry a date that shatters the comfortable narrative. They are not 3.6 million years old. They are approximately 5.7 million years old. That number alone is a seismic shock to the established timeline. According to the prevailing out-of-Africa theory, the very first members of our human lineage, the earliest hominins, did not even emerge on that continent until roughly 2 million years later. Yet here, on a European island, the rock tells a different story. The footprints, known as the Trachylos tracks, possess what lead researcher Per Olberg described as an unmistakably human-like form. Let us look closely at what that means. The big toe is not splayed out like an ape's grasping thumb. It is aligned neatly with the other toes. There is a pronounced ball of the foot and the clear, curved impression of an arch, anatomical features that are the exclusive calling cards of a creature that walks upright on two legs. This is not a bear, not a primate scrambling on all fours. This is the signature of a biped. The implications are staggering. If the dating is correct, it suggests that the experiment of walking upright, the very trait that defines our lineage, was not a unique African invention that later spread outward. Instead, it may have been an evolutionary opportunity seized upon in multiple places, a powerful adaptation that emerged more than once across the ancient world. The map of human origins, which for so long featured a single, bold arrow emanating from East Africa, suddenly becomes a messy, interconnected web of possibilities. Were there pioneers in Europe whose story was completely lost? Did early hominins disperse across land bridges that vanished beneath rising seas, leaving only these cryptic footprints as evidence of their journey? This Mediterranean mystery does more than add an older date to a chart. It compels us to fundamentally rethink the geography of our own genesis. It suggests our family tree is far more ancient and its roots far more widely spread than we ever dared to believe. And if that is true, then the next set of footprints we examine becomes even more astonishing, for it asks us to consider who or what was walking in North America at a time when science insists no human being could possibly be there. The Mediterranean mystery was a challenge to the map, but the next discovery rewrites the timeline itself. On the storm-lashed coastline of Norfolk, England, a different kind of archive was exposed by the relentless North Sea. In 2013, after a fierce tide scoured away layers of sand, the silt beneath revealed a series of hollows. They were not random, they were footprints. Human footprints pressed into the mud of an ancient estuary nearly 1 million years ago. Known as the Happisburgh footprints, they are the oldest direct evidence of humans anywhere outside of the African continent, dating between 850,000 and 950,000 years old. The world they depict is almost unimaginable to us today. This was not the warm, wooded Africa of our earliest ancestors. This was Britain during the Pleistocene, a cold, harsh land of coniferous forests and braided rivers where winters were long and resources were scarce. The species that left these prints was likely Homo antecessor, a pioneer in every sense of the word. Their presence here, at this latitude, at this time, shatters a long-held assumption. It proves that early humans ventured into northern Europe hundreds of thousands of years earlier than any model had predicted, enduring climates we once thought were beyond their capacity. But the true power of the Happisburgh site is not just its age or location. It is its heartbreaking intimacy. Archaeologist Nick Ashton, who led the research, described it as capturing a snapshot of a family group. The prints vary in size. There are larger impressions from adults and nestled among them smaller, fainter tracks from children. You can almost see the scene. A small band, perhaps 5 or 6 individuals, moving together across the silty flats beside a river. Were they foraging for shellfish or plants? Were they simply traveling from one patch of forest to another, the adults setting a careful pace for the younger ones? In that single moment, preserved by a chance layer of sediment and revealed by a retreating tide, we are not looking at fossils or stone tools. We are witnessing people. The footprints tell a story of profound resilience and social bonding. To survive in that environment required not just physical toughness, but cooperation, shared knowledge, and care across generations. The children's presence means this was not a desperate, fleeing scout, but a settled group making a life in a challenging new world. This forces us to ask a difficult question. If a family could walk the chilly shores of ancient Britain almost 1 million years ago, how much further did their descendants, or their cousins, eventually go? The answer may lie on the other side of the Atlantic, in prints that suggest a journey of impossible scale. The confident stride of a family in ancient Britain was built upon a gait perfected far earlier and far away. On the windswept shores of Lake Turkana in Kenya, 1.5 million years ago, a different kind of pioneer left its mark. a group of Homo erectus individuals walked across a muddy landscape, their steps sinking into soft sediment near the water's edge. Known as the Ileret footprints, these tracks are not just older impressions, they are a biomechanical blueprint, and what they reveal is astonishing. These hominins, with brains still significantly smaller than our own, walked with a stride that is, in the words of footprint expert Professor Matthew Bennett, fundamentally human. Let us break down what that means. When you take a step, your heel strikes the ground first. Your weight then rolls forward along the outside of your foot, across a pronounced arch, and finally pushes off from the ball and toes. This heel strike to toe-off sequence is a hallmark of efficient, energy-saving bipedalism. It is the engine of endurance. The Ileret footprints preserve this exact pressure pattern in stunning detail. The deep impression of the heel, the lighter sweep of the arch, and the clear push-off point at the front are all there, captured in stone. The stride length and the way the feet are placed directly one in front of the other indicate a balanced, confident walker, fully adapted to life on the ground. This discovery shatters another assumption. We used to think that such a modern, efficient way of moving was a late innovation, perhaps unique to our own species, Homo sapiens. But the Ileret tracks tell us that this elegant locomotive technology was already in place 1.5 million years ago, in a species known primarily for its pioneering spirit. This modern gait was not just a way of getting from point A to point B, it was the ultimate survival tool. With this stride, Homo erectus could cover vast distances with minimal energy expenditure. They could follow migrating herds across savannas, travel to distant sources of stone for tools, and explore entirely new ecological niches. This walking and running capability is widely considered the key to their unprecedented success, allowing them to become the first hominin to spread out of Africa and across much of the Old World. But the implications run even deeper. Does a modern human gait imply a modern human mind? An efficient, endurance-based body suggests a lifestyle built around persistence hunting or long-distance foraging, activities that require not just physical stamina but foresight, cooperation, and complex planning. The confident stride preserved at Ileret points toward a far more capable, socially intricate, and adventurous ancestor than the simple scavenger we once imagined. If the body was this advanced so long ago, what else were they capable of? The next footprints we encounter suggest an answer, one that involves a journey of impossible scale to a continent deemed unreachable. The modern gait of Homo erectus unlocked the world, but sometimes the world fought back with fire. In present-day Nicaragua, a different kind of footprint story unfolds, one not of deep time, but of a single, terrifying afternoon around 2,100 years ago. The ground at Acahualinca was not mud or sand, but a layer of fine volcanic ash, still warm from a nearby eruption. Into this soft, perilous surface a community fled. Their footprints, and those of the animals sharing their world, were captured with photographic clarity as the ash cooled and hardened into stone. This is not a slow migration or a routine foraging trip. This is a time capsule of sheer, immediate crisis. The tracks tell a vivid and layered story. Human footprints, ranging from adults to much smaller impressions likely left by children, move in a consistent direction away from the volcanic threat. The spacing between steps indicates a hurried, purposeful walk, not a frantic sprint. This suggests a group trying to move quickly while maintaining cohesion, ensuring no one was left behind. Even more striking are the other tracks preserved alongside them. Deer, birds, and other local fauna left their own prints in the same ash, often paralleling the human path. This creates a haunting tableau not of a hunt but of a shared, panicked exodus. Predator and prey, for one critical moment, were united by a greater danger. Researchers studying the site note this offers an unparalleled behavioral snapshot. We are not looking at bones or tools, but at a dynamic event frozen mid-action. The footprints reveal a community's instinctive response to disaster, highlighting social bonds and the imperative to protect the young. The intermingled animal tracks provide a rare window into the shared landscape of the time, showing how humans and fauna coexisted and reacted to the same cataclysmic forces. This ashen procession moves us beyond wondering what ancient people were and shows us vividly what they did. It captures a universal moment of resilience where the immediate strategy for survival was simple: keep moving together. This poignant snapshot of a community in motion raises a profound question. If footprints can preserve a single afternoon of terror so perfectly, what can they tell us about an entire culture's beliefs, especially when those prints are not on the ground, but deliberately placed upon a sacred wall? The shared flight from volcanic ash reveals a community bound by crisis, but on the ancient floodplains east of Lake Turkana, a different kind of gathering took place. The Koobi Fora footprints, pressed into the mud roughly 1.4 million years ago, tell a story not of unity but of diversity. Here, the sediment captured the passing of several individuals, but the tracks they left are not all the same. Some show the familiar, efficient arch and aligned toes of a modern bipedal stride. Others appear different, with variations in the shape of the foot and the way weight was distributed. This subtle discrepancy in the stone is a seismic clue. Researchers, including paleoanthropologist John Harris, have proposed a startling possibility. The Koobi Fora site may not record a single hominin species, but two. Imagine this landscape as a paleo-commuter route, a pathway used by different kinds of human ancestors sharing the same resources. One set of prints could belong to Homo erectus, the skilled walker with the human-like gait we saw earlier. The other, intriguingly, might belong to a member of the Paranthropus lineage, a robust cousin known for its powerful jaws and large cheek teeth, often thought of as a specialized herbivore. The profound implication is that for a significant stretch of time, these two distinct branches of our family tree were contemporaries. They walked the same shores, drank from the same lake, and likely saw each other on the horizon. This shatters the simple, ladder-like progression of human evolution, where one species neatly replaces another. Instead, Koobi Fora paints a picture of a bushy, complex family tree, with multiple branches alive at once. The world 1.4 million years ago was not a stage for a solo act, but a crowded ecological theater. How did these different relatives interact? Did they ignore one another, partition the landscape, or compete directly for food and space? The varied footprints suggest they had different physical adaptations, perhaps leading to different survival strategies. One may have been a persistent walker and hunter, the other a dedicated forager of tough plants. Their overlapping paths force us to envision a dynamic, competitive stage in our deep history, where the ultimate success of our own lineage was never a foregone conclusion. It was a contest of adaptations played out one step at a time across a shared world. And if our ancestors shared their world with other hominins, what other, more mysterious travelers might they have encountered on their journeys? The crowded world of Koobi Fora gives way to a solitary signature on a windswept dune. On the coast of South Africa, near a place called Nahoon Point, a single footprint was pressed into the sand approximately 124,000 years ago. This is not the trackway of a group, but the mark of one individual, an early member of our own species, Homo sapiens, walking alone. The print is stunningly clear, preserving the distinct curve of an arch and the precise outline of toes, a direct anatomical match to a modern human foot. This is a tangible connection to a mind and body like our own, captured in the late Pleistocene. The context of this step is deeply evocative. It was found not in isolation, but near a complex of coastal caves that were rich with the debris of ancient life, stone tools, and the remains of meals. This suggests a landscape not just traversed but inhabited. The individual who left this print was likely moving through a familiar world, perhaps descending from a sheltered cave to forage along the shoreline, scanning the dunes for edible plants or tracking the movement of game. It was a moment of mundane, daily activity, a simple act of survival that now echoes across millennia. This solitary step speaks volumes about the behavior and ecology of our early ancestors in southern Africa. They were not just surviving, they were thriving in a coastal environment, exploiting its diverse resources with a familiarity that implies deep knowledge and adaptation. The clarity of the footprint, its modern form, tells us that the physical evolution of our species was essentially complete by this time, but it prompts a deeper, more intriguing question. If the body was modern, what about the mind within? This individual walked a landscape that, not long after in archaeological terms, would become a cradle for some of humanity's earliest symbolic expression, for the intricate art and personal adornment found in other South African caves. Does this single, purposeful step on a dune represent the practical foundation upon which that symbolic revolution was built? The mundane act of walking a known path, of understanding a territory, may have been the essential precursor to mapping that world onto cave walls and onto one's own body. This footprint is a powerful signature of presence, a quiet declaration that we were here, fully formed, and already reading the land with a modern gaze. But if our species was leaving such clear impressions in African sand over 100,000 years ago, where else did that modern gaze fall, and what impossible journeys did it eventually will the body to undertake? That solitary signature on the African dune was a beginning, not an end. It was the starting point of a dispersal that would become the ultimate test of human ingenuity. To follow that journey, we must travel to a landscape transformed by ice. The Willandra Lakes region of New South Wales, Australia, is a series of dry, ancient lakebeds today. But 20,000 years ago, it was a lush oasis during the depths of the last glacial maximum. Here, on the soft clay of a receding shoreline, a small community walked and the earth remembered. Discovered in 2003, these are the oldest known human footprints on the Australian continent, and they do not just show people were present. They show them living, working, and caring for one another with stunning intimacy. The tracks tell multiple stories at once. There are the prints of adults moving with steady purpose. There are the smaller, fainter impressions of children. In one poignant sequence, a set of adult tracks is accompanied by the intermittent drag marks of a child's heels, suggesting a tired youngster being carried or gently pulled along. Another path shows the clear evidence of a sprint, the elongated stride and deep toe impressions indicating a sudden, rapid dash. Archaeologist Steve Webb, who studied the site, interprets this as a hunting scene, perhaps a chase after a wounded animal or a swift response to an opportunity. This is not a ceremonial site or a burial ground. This is a preserved mourning from the Ice Age, a ledger of daily survival written in the mud. But among these tracks lies one that transforms our understanding of this ancient society. It is the trail of a one-legged individual. The prints show not a hobbling, struggling gait, but a skilled, rhythmic movement. This person had clearly adapted over a long period, using a walking aid with such proficiency that they kept pace with the group. Their presence is a revelation. In an epoch defined by extreme environmental challenge, where every calorie counted and mobility was life, this community did not leave someone behind. They supported an individual who could not walk as others did, ensuring their participation in the collective life of hunting, gathering, and moving across country. This speaks to a profound depth of social care, compassion, and shared responsibility that we rarely attribute to such distant eras. It tells us that resilience was not just physical toughness, but a social contract. These Australian impressions do more than mark a date of arrival. They demonstrate a deep time connection to country, an intimate knowledge of a challenging landscape forged over countless generations. The varied tracks, from the sprint of the hunter to the supported pace of their companion, paint a picture of a complex, cooperative society already fully adapted to its world. It forces a humbling realization. By the time these prints were pressed into the clay, Aboriginal cultures had already been living in, understanding, and nurturing this continent for tens of thousands of years. Their story is one of the longest continuous chapters in human history, and it begins with a single step on a lakeshore. But if humans could thrive in Ice Age Australia, what other impossible environments did they conquer? The next footprints suggest an answer that lies not on a lakebed, but on the roof of the world. The supportive pace of that one-legged traveler in Australia reveals a profound social resilience, but resilience itself demands a starting point. That origin story for the Americas has just been torn apart by footsteps in the mud. In the stark, white gypsum dunes of what is now New Mexico, a different kind of mud once existed. It was the soft, wet shoreline of an ancient lake during the last glacial maximum, and between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago, that mud captured a day in the life of the first Americans. These are the White Sands footprints, and their recently confirmed age is nothing short of a historical detonation. For decades, the dominant story was clear. The first people to enter the Americas were the Clovis culture, skilled big game hunters who crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia around 13,000 years ago. Their distinct stone spear points were found from coast to coast, marking a rapid and seemingly definitive colonization. The White Sands tracks, however, were pressed into the earth a staggering 7,000 to 10,000 years before those Clovis hunters ever arrived. This is not a minor adjustment, it is a complete rewrite of the continental prologue. The evidence lies in the earth itself. Researchers did not date the footprints directly, but the layers that cradle them. Above and below the track-bearing layer, they found ancient seeds of ditch grass preserved in the alkaline environment. Using radiocarbon dating on these seeds, scientists established a firm chronological bracket. The footprints could not be younger than the seeds below them, nor older than the seeds above. The result was a solid, repeatable date that placed humans in the southwestern United States during the absolute peak of the last ice age. This single finding shatters the Clovis first paradigm into dust, but the true power of White Sands is not just in the date, it is in the breathtakingly human behavior frozen in the gypsum. This is not a site of grand monuments or tools, it is a snapshot of an ordinary day. We see the tracks of teenagers, their steps sometimes close together, sometimes far apart, suggesting moments of walking, perhaps even playful jumping. In one poignant sequence, a set of smaller adult footprints stops, and beside them appear the tiny prints of a toddler. The adult then continues walking, the toddler's prints now appearing in line with her own. The image is unmistakable. A mother, likely carrying her child, paused to set them down for a moment before picking them up again to continue the journey. Then there are the hunting scenes. Human footprints are found circling and approaching the massive, clawed tracks of a giant ground sloth. In one location, the human tracks come so close to the sloths that the animal appears to have risen on its hind legs, possibly in a defensive posture, before shuffling away. This is not abstract evidence of hunting. This is the tactical pursuit, step by cautious step, captured in real time. Scientist David Bustos, who has worked at the site for years, calls it a window into life. And through that window, we see a people already deeply familiar with this challenging Ice Age landscape. They were not desperate new arrivals. They were established, adaptable, and living in social groups. Their presence so early and so far south forces a dramatic rethinking of how they got there. If the interior ice-free corridor between the massive continental glaciers was not yet open 23,000 years ago, how did they come? The most compelling answer now points to a different route, a coastal pathway. Imagine small groups moving along the Pacific coastline, perhaps using boats, skirting the southern edge of the ice sheets and exploiting rich marine and shoreline resources in a kind of kelp highway. This coastal migration would have been a slower generational journey, a story not of a single rapid invasion but of a gradual, skillful exploration. The playful steps of children at White Sands are a signature of normalcy. They tell us that by this time these pioneers were not just surviving, they were home. And their early arrival stands as a testament to human ingenuity, proving our ancestors' capacity to reach and thrive in a new world far earlier and by paths far more clever than we ever believed possible. If humans could navigate Ice Age coastlines to populate the Americas, what other forgotten pathways did they walk, and what even earlier arrivals might still lie hidden beneath our feet? The playful steps at White Sands speak of a world already claimed, but long before that, another group of pioneers faced a far more volatile landscape. In the shadow of an extinct volcano in southern Italy, a different kind of pathway is etched into the stone. Known locally as the Siampate del Diavolo or the Devil's Trails, these are not the prints of a leisurely stroll. They are the deliberate, careful tracks of a group descending the steep, ash-covered slope of the Roccamonfina volcano approximately 350,000 years ago. The makers were likely Homo heidelbergensis, a pivotal species considered a common ancestor to both Neanderthals and our own lineage. What they left behind is not a scattering of random steps, but a clear, intentional route. The terrain they navigated was treacherous. This was not stable ground, but a layer of freshly fallen volcanic ash, soft and unstable, coating a sharp incline. A single misstep could have meant a serious fall, yet the footprints show none of the panic or scrambling you might expect. Instead, they reveal a methodical, almost calculated descent. The individuals placed their feet with care, often using a side-stepping motion to maintain balance and control their speed. In some places, a handprint is visible pressed into the slope beside a footprint, a momentary brace against the steepness. This is not a group fleeing in terror. This is a group moving with purpose and a clear awareness of the danger. Researchers studying the trails see more than just footprints. They see evidence of advanced cognitive mapping. To choose this specific path down the volcano, these hominins needed to assess the landscape from above. They had to identify the most stable ash, judge the angle of descent, and plan a route that minimized risk. This implies a mental model of the terrain, an ability to project a safe course before taking the first step. The trails are not a one-off accident either. Multiple tracks follow similar routes, suggesting this was a known path used repeatedly. Why would anyone regularly descend an active volcanic slope? The answer likely lies in necessity and opportunity. The volcanic landscape, while dangerous, could have been a source of vital resources. Obsidian for sharp tools, deposits of clay, or perhaps hunting grounds in the valleys below. The volcano was not just a threat, it was a feature of their home to be understood and utilized. The Devil's Trails transform our view of Homo heidelbergensis. They were not merely robust survivors, but savvy navigators of a complex world. Their careful steps demonstrate a sophisticated relationship with their environment, one built on observation, memory, and risk assessment. They were not at the mercy of the landscape. They were reading it, learning its dangers, and plotting a course through it. This deliberate negotiation of a volatile slope stands as some of the earliest clear evidence of systematic landscape use by pre-modern humans. It shows a mind already thinking several steps ahead, a mind that would eventually give rise to both the Neanderthals of Europe and the modern humans who would walk across continents. But if these ancestors could master the slopes of an active volcano, what other impossible feats of endurance and adaptation were they and their descendants truly capable of? That deliberate descent down an Italian volcano reveals a mind capable of planning a path through danger, but the ultimate test of that cognitive mapping would come on a scale spanning oceans and ice ages. The Calvert Island footprints offer a single, fragile clue to that epic journey. On the remote shoreline of British Columbia, pressed into a layer of compact clay that once lay just above the high tide line, a single human footprint waited for 13,000 years. It is not a trackway, not a story of a group's movement. It is one impression, a momentary pause on a vast and lonely coast. Yet this lone print carries the weight of an entire theory. Its location is everything. Calvert Island sits on the Pacific Northwest coast, a region that was emerging from beneath the crushing weight of ice sheets around this time. This single step, dated to approximately 13,000 years ago, places humans on this coastline just as the world was thawing. Archaeologist Duncan McLaren, who helped uncover the print, described it as evidence of the earliest coastal inhabitants. The significance of that statement cannot be overstated. For decades, the story of how humans first entered the Americas was an inland one, focused on an ice-free corridor between glaciers. But that corridor may not have been fully open or viable when people were already at White Sands, thousands of miles to the south. The Calvert Island footprint lends powerful, tangible support to the alternative, a coastal migration route. Imagine a world of lowered sea levels where a labyrinth of islands and fjords stretched along the continent's edge. This was not a barren wasteland, but a kelp highway, a rich marine ecosystem brimming with fish, shellfish, seabirds, and marine mammals. Travel here would not have required trekking across treacherous, unknown interiors. It would have demanded boats and the knowledge to use them. The person who left that print on Calvert Island was likely standing near where they had pulled their watercraft onto the shore. They were part of a maritime culture, living off the abundance of the coast, moving gradually southward in generations-long hops from one resource-rich haven to the next. This lifestyle, however, leaves a maddeningly faint archaeological signature. Their homes were on beaches that have since been swallowed by rising seas. Their tools were made of wood and fiber that rot away. Their boats are long gone. A footprint in intertidal clay is a miracle of preservation, a fleeting mark that survived against all odds. This ephemeral nature is why such coastal sites are so rare and so precious. Each one is a fragile testament to a way of life that has virtually vanished from the record. So how does this coastal whisper from Canada complement the inland story from White Sands? They are not contradictory narratives, but parallel chapters in a much more complex saga. The people at White Sands, living in the interior thousands of years earlier, may represent an earlier wave, perhaps pioneers who arrived before the coastal route was fully viable, or who moved inland from the coast itself. The Calvert Island footprint from a later period shows that the coastal highway was actively being used as the ice retreated, offering a different path for subsequent generations. Together, they paint a picture of a peopling of the Americas that was not a single event, but a process, a multifaceted exploration by adaptable groups using different strategies at different times. That lone print on a Canadian beach is more than a mark in clay. It is an echo from a lost coastal world, a world of watercraft and tides, of people who read the ocean as others read the land. It hints at a vast, now submerged chapter of human history, a chapter written not in stone tools on high ground, but in footprints on shores that have long since disappeared beneath the waves. 7,000 years later, the vast coastal journeys had settled into a familiar rhythm. On the wide, muddy flats of the Severn estuary in Wales, the tide retreated to reveal a different kind of story, not of migration or crisis, but of a day like any other. The Uskmouth footprints, pressed into the intertidal silt during the Mesolithic era, are a window into prehistoric family life. They show us not pioneers conquering a new world, but people at home in one they had known for generations. The tracks crisscross the ancient mudflat in a beautiful, chaotic tapestry. There are the deep, steady impressions of adults moving with purpose toward patches of reeds or shellfish beds. Alongside them, weaving in and out, are the smaller, fainter prints of children. Some of these smaller tracks run in playful arcs or form small circles, patterns that researchers interpret not as simple walking, but as moments of spontaneous dancing, skipping, or a game played while the adults worked. This is the rare magic of Uskmouth. It captures not just movement but mood. The preservation is so exceptional that you can see the individual ridges of skin on some soles, the slight slip of a foot in the soft mud, the push off of a toe. It feels less like archaeology and more like stumbling upon a scene that just unfolded minutes ago. The social dynamics are written plainly in the mud. This was not a task for a solitary hunter. The whole community, from the oldest to the very young, was engaged in foraging this rich tidal landscape. The children were there, learning the rhythms of the estuary, identifying edible plants, and understanding the safe windows between the tides. Their presence tells us that knowledge was transferred not in formal lessons, but through immersion, through doing. The group size, inferred from the overlapping paths, suggests an extended family or a small band, working together in a coordinated yet relaxed manner. The landscape itself was a partner in this daily life. The Mesolithic people of Britain were not masters of the wild, but fluent readers of its specific dialects. They understood the 7 estuaries' dramatic tides, its seasonal bounty of fish and wildfowl, the precise places where certain routes could be dug or flint could be found. Their footprints follow no straight lines but meander from resource patch to resource patch, tracing the efficient, intuitive map they carried in their minds. So what do these casual, millennia-old steps tell us? They tell us that after the ice, life found its cadence. It was a rhythm built on deep environmental knowledge, on communal labor where every member had a role, and on moments of simple joy etched into the mud beside the work. The Uskmouth mudflat is a snapshot of prehistoric normalcy, a powerful reminder that history is not only made in grand migrations or volcanic eruptions, but in the quiet, repeated patterns of a family gathering food on a sunny day by the water. This portrait of integrated community life stands in quiet contrast to a much older, more enigmatic set of tracks where the story is not of togetherness, but of a solitary and perhaps desperate pursuit. The serene mudflats of Uskmouth present a clear and comforting picture, but not every mark in the stone tells an unambiguous story. Sometimes the most tantalizing discovery becomes a lesson in scientific humility. This is the cautionary tale of Eve's footprint. In 1995, along the shores of South Africa's Langebon Lagoon, geologist David Roberts uncovered what appeared to be a single, perfect human footprint pressed into a layer of hardened sand and volcanic ash. Its form was compelling, a clear arch and distinct toes, seemingly left by a modern human walking across a damp dune. When initial dating suggested an age of 117,000 years, the announcement was electrifying. Here, it was claimed, was the oldest known footprint of our own species, Homo sapiens, a direct connection to an ancestral Eve frozen in time. The world celebrated a poetic and profound discovery. But science thrives on skepticism. As other researchers examined the site, questions arose. The primary challenge came from geology itself. Critics argued that the feature's morphology, while suggestive, could be explained by natural processes. Wind and water erosion can sculpt depressions in soft rock that eerily mimic the contours of a foot, especially in the kind of eolianite rock found at Langebon. The apparent toe impressions, some contended, might be the result of pebbles weathering out of the matrix, leaving behind hollows in a pattern that our pattern-seeking brains instinctively assemble into a familiar shape. The debate that followed was not a conflict of personalities, but a necessary, rigorous clash of methodologies. On one side were the morphological arguments, based on the shape's apparent anatomy. On the other were geological counterpoints, demanding proof that went beyond resemblance to demonstrate a true biomechanical pressure pattern. like the heel strike and push-off seen in undisputed prints. This controversy did not destroy the field, it strengthened it. The case of Eve's footprint serves as a foundational lesson in ichnology, the science of traces. It underscores that seeing is not always believing, and that extraordinary claims do, indeed, require extraordinary evidence. From this dispute, more robust protocols were forged. Today, the verification of a potential hominin footprint is a multidisciplinary siege. Geologists meticulously analyze the sediment's properties to rule out erosional mimics. Paleontologists search for associated animal tracks or biological material. Three-dimensional laser scanning creates hyper-detailed digital models that can be analyzed for pressure distribution and stride dynamics, looking for the subtle signatures of weight transfer that natural erosion cannot replicate. The goal is to move from a shape that looks like a foot to a feature that could only have been made by one. So, was it a footprint? The scientific consensus today leans heavily toward it being a compelling natural formation. But its legacy is far from a failure. Eve's footprint taught researchers to be more careful, more critical, and more collaborative. It raised the standard of proof for every discovery that followed, ensuring that the next headline-grabbing print is backed by a mountain of cross-verified data. This rigorous process, born from doubt, is what gives us confidence in the authenticity of the other prints we have explored. It transforms the story from one of a lost ancestor to a lesson about how we find truth, a reminder that the path to understanding our past is paved with both discovery and healthy doubt. And sometimes the most important step forward is the one we decide not to take for granted. This careful, methodical approach becomes absolutely vital when the next set of tracks appears not on a beach or a lake bed, but on the ceiling of a deep, dark cave where the story they tell is not of travel, but of a profound and perilous journey into the earth itself. While the controversy over a single print taught caution, other sites offer an overwhelming abundance of evidence. The ever-shifting sands of Formby Point on England's northwest coast guard a prehistoric gallery of breathtaking scale. Here, the retreating tides do not reveal one or two lonely impressions, but thousands upon thousands of footprints, a chaotic masterpiece etched across the ancient intertidal mudflats. This is not a single snapshot, but a layered film reel of life spanning from the Mesolithic into the Neolithic periods. The cast of characters is vast and vivid. Human footprints of all sizes crisscross the hardened surfaces, but they are far from alone. Pressed into the same silt are the deep, cloven prints of red deer, the sharp, purposeful tracks of wolves, the distinctive marks of wild boar, and even the delicate impressions of wading birds and small mammals. This is not just a trail, it is an entire ecosystem fossilized in motion. Researchers walking these exposed beds are literally stepping into a ghost landscape, a vibrant coastal world that vanished millennia ago. The human tracks alone tell diverse stories. Some paths head straight for the water's edge, their makers likely intent on gathering shellfish or checking fishing traps. Other prints cluster in certain areas, suggesting temporary camps or places where groups gathered, perhaps to process a catch or hold communal gatherings. There are tracks that show a steady walking pace and others that indicate a sudden sprint. This variety paints a picture of a daily life rich with different activities, all centered on the incredible bounty of this estuary environment. But the true narrative power of Formby Point lies in the interactions frozen in time. The prints of humans and animals overlap, intersect, and sometimes parallel each other in ways that spark urgent questions. Do those human footprints following directly behind the slot of a red deer record a careful hunt? Do the wolf tracks that approach a human path and then veer sharply away tell a story of mutual recognition and avoidance? The mud preserves these moments of proximity without revealing the outcome, inviting us to contemplate the complex dance of coexistence, competition, and pursuit that defined this ancient world. Scientists use this dense palimpsest of tracks for remarkable detective work. By mapping the different layers and the species present, they can track environmental shifts over centuries. Changes in the size and type of animal prints can indicate fluctuations in climate or habitat. The sheer density of all the tracks, from the largest deer to the smallest bird, forces a dramatic rethink of these prehistoric coasts. This was not a silent, empty wilderness. It was a dynamic, densely populated theater, thrumming with life and constant activity. The Formby Gallery challenges any static view of the past. It shows a landscape in continuous use, a busy corridor where the daily routines of people were intimately woven into the movements of the creatures they lived alongside. This vibrant snapshot of coexistence stands in stark contrast to a much more enigmatic and solitary scene, where the only tracks leading into a deep, dark cave belong to a child, walking alone into the earth for reasons we may never fully comprehend. The vibrant gallery of Formby Point was a world of light and open air, but human expression has always had a shadowed twin. Deep within the French Pyrenees, the cavern of Tuc d'Audebert holds a secret of a different kind. Here, the footprints are not on a sunlit shore, but in the profound, eternal dark, far beyond the reach of daylight. They were pressed into soft clay approximately 14,000 years ago by an individual of the Magdalenian culture, and they share their chamber with one of prehistory's most astonishing creations, two magnificent bison sculpted from the cave's own clay. The tracks and the art are not separate. They are a single, continuous statement. The footprints lead from the cave's entrance through narrow passages and directly to the small, secluded chamber where the bison lie. They circle the sculptures, their path worn into the clay floor, suggesting the maker returned to this spot again and again. This is not a trail of transit or foraging. It is a pathway to creation. To understand this, you must follow that path in your mind. You leave behind the world of sun and wind, descending into a silence broken only by dripping water and your own breath. The air grows cool and still. The beam of your feeble lamp or the flicker of a simple grease lamp carried all those millennia ago casts wild shadows on the walls. Every step into that depth is a choice, a commitment to leave the practical world behind. When you finally reach the bison, you are in a sanctuary. Prehistorian Jean Klotz speaks of the sensory overload of these spaces, the total immersion in an environment that feels utterly separate from the everyday. In this context, the act of shaping the clay becomes more than craft. It is a ritual. The artist did not simply walk to work. They embarked on a journey into the earth's womb to bring forth form from formlessness. Their footprints are the map of that pilgrimage. So what do these prints represent? Are they the artist's signature, a way of saying, I was here, I made this with my own hands and my own feet? Could they trace the steps of a ritual dance, a physical prayer performed around the newly born figures? Or do they mark the repeated visits of a keeper, returning to maintain the sculptures or to commune with the spirit they embody? The fusion is what matters. At Tuc d'Audebert, the track and the artwork are inseparable components of a single, profound human behavior. This challenges the simplest interpretation of footprints as mere records of getting from one place to another. Here, the journey itself was the point. The movement through the dark was part of the ceremony, and the impression left in the clay was as intentional as the sculpture it surrounds. These steps in the dark elevate the footprint from a trace of survival to a component of symbol, a physical prayer etched into the very floor of a sacred space. They remind us that for our ancestors, the line between the practical and the spiritual, between walking and worshipping, was often beautifully, intentionally blurred. The sacred journey into the dark was one side of the human experience, but survival in the Ice Age demanded a far more visceral kind of encounter. Back in the blinding white gypsum of New Mexico, the Lake Otero trackways reveal a different kind of drama, one written not in clay but in the tense choreography of predator and prey. Here, human footprints do not walk alone. They intersect, circle, and close in on the massive, unmistakable tracks of Pleistocene megafauna, turning the ancient lakebed into a frozen chase scene. Let us follow one of these sequences. A set of human footprints, likely from an adult, approaches the deep, rounded impressions left by a giant ground sloth. The human tracks do not follow a straight line. Instead, they curve in a wide arc, coming up alongside the sloth's path before closing the distance. This is not the path of someone simply walking by. This is the pattern of a stalk. The sloth's own tracks tell the next part of the story. In one spot, its large hind foot impressions are deeply planted, while the smaller front prints are lifted off the ground. To researchers, this configuration strongly suggests the massive creature rising onto its hind legs, perhaps to get a better look at its surroundings, or more likely, to assume a defensive posture against an approaching threat. The humans were not just observing, they were engaging. Another set of prints nearby captures a different kind of giant. Mammoth tracks, each one a dinner plate-sized depression in the ancient mud, march across the landscape. And weaving among them, like shadows, are human footprints. The proximity is startling. In one area, a human track is placed directly inside a mammoth's print, a clear sign that the person passed by after the animal had moved through, perhaps following its trail. This is direct, tangible evidence of a relationship that has long been the subject of speculation and debate. We are not looking at bones with cut marks that suggest butchery after the fact. We are witnessing the pursuit itself, the moment of intersection between two species. So what do these frozen pursuits tell us about Ice Age hunting strategies? The careful circling of the sloth hints at tactics, at an understanding of the animal's behavior and potential vulnerabilities. A direct charge at a creature of that size, armed with formidable claws, would have been incredibly dangerous. Stalking and harassment, perhaps to drive it toward others or to exhaust it, seems a more plausible reading. The mammoth tracks suggest something different, perhaps tracking a herd to identify a vulnerable individual or scavenging an opportunity. This moves us beyond the abstract overkill hypothesis, the idea that humans alone caused these extinctions through relentless slaughter. The white sands prints show something more nuanced, a real-time dance of risk and opportunity. Each encounter was a high-stakes calculation, demanding cooperation, communication, and deep knowledge of the prey. These encounters undoubtedly shaped human culture, cementing the roles of hunters and storytellers, and fueling the imagery that would later flow onto cave walls. But they also shaped the fate of the megafauna themselves. The constant pressure of a clever, persistent predator, even in small numbers, added a new and potent stressor to populations already contending with a rapidly changing climate. The Lake Otero trackways do not show a blitzkrieg, but they do show a persistent, intelligent presence in the landscape, a new rule in the ancient game of survival. This vivid evidence from a dry lakebed makes the end of the Ice Age feel less like a distant event and more like a shared story, a final chapter in which humans and giants walked the same ground, their fates forever intertwined in the mud. The ghostly pursuits of hunter and mammoth on that ancient lakebed capture a world still wild, but a profound change was already walking the earth. On the rapidly eroding coastline near Liverpool, England, the North Sea performs a relentless, double-edged magic. With each storm surge and high tide, it scours away the modern beach, revealing then swiftly destroying a library written in mud. These are the Sefton Coast prints, impressions over 5,000 years old, and they document a revolution not in stone monuments, but in footprints. This is a tidal time machine, offering fleeting glimpses into the Neolithic world as it was being remade. Unlike the earlier Mesolithic prints of Formby Point, which showed people moving among wild deer and boar, the Sefton tracks tell a new story. Here, pressed into the same silty clay, human footprints walk alongside the distinctive cloven prints of domesticated cattle. This simple juxtaposition is monumental. It marks the intimate moment when farming took root on these shores. We are not looking at abstract evidence of agriculture, like a discarded plowshare or a grain of charred wheat. We are witnessing the daily practice of it. The tracks show small herds being moved along the shoreline, perhaps to fresh grazing or back to a settlement. You can see where a human walker adjusted their pace to match the animals, where the group slowed or bunched together. These are the footprints of herding, of husbandry, of a new relationship between people and other species. The coastal location itself challenges a long-held assumption. We often picture the Neolithic revolution as an inland phenomenon, centered on forest clearings and river valleys where crops were sown. But the Sefton prints insist that the coastline was not a periphery. It was a vital, integrated part of this new way of life. The shore offered a rich mosaic of resources: seaweed for fodder or fertilizer, fish and shellfish for protein, and the open, manageable terrain of the intertidal zone for moving animals. These communities were not choosing between farming and foraging. They were blending both into a resilient coastal economy. The ephemeral nature of these discoveries adds a layer of poignant urgency. A set of perfect prints revealing the stride of a Neolithic farmer and their cattle might be exposed by a winter storm. Archaeologists have only a brief window, sometimes just a few tides, to digitally map, photograph, and study them before the sea reclaims its archive forever. This constant cycle of revelation and loss makes every captured trackway a precious victory against time. It forces a shift in perspective. The grand, permanent monuments like stone circles tell us what these societies built for the ages. But the Sefton prints show us how they lived, hour by hour, season by season, their feet and the hooves of their cattle pressing into the mud during the mundane, essential work of building a new world. This intimate portrait of a blended life, however, stands in stark contrast to a discovery from a very different landscape, where the footprints tell a story not of daily rhythm, but of a single, catastrophic event that froze a community in a final, desperate moment. That final, desperate moment in one community's history was a punctuation mark in a far grander story of climate and survival. The Nefer Desert of Saudi Arabia today is a realm of relentless sun and sweeping dunes, a landscape that seems to define the word barren. Yet beneath this arid facade lies the ghost of a paradise. Scattered across ancient, hardened lake beds are footprints that tell a story of a world turned inside out. These are not the tracks of a brief visit, but a chronicle of life during Arabia's green phases, when monsoon rains transformed this now empty quarter into a sprawling savanna, dotted with freshwater lakes and teeming with life. The cast preserved in the stone is astonishing. Alongside the clear, familiar prints of Homo sapiens are the massive, rounded impressions of elephants, the distinctive tracks of camels, and the paw marks of predators, all converging on the same shorelines between 120,000 and 7,000 years ago. This is not a hunting scene or a migration route in the traditional sense. It is an ecosystem frozen in a moment of coexistence, a genuine snapshot, as researcher Matthew Stewart describes it, of a lost world. The human footprints here are particularly revealing. They are not randomly scattered. They cluster near the edges of these paleolakes, along the muddy margins where water was most accessible. This precise placement speaks of a deep, strategic knowledge of the landscape. These were not lost travelers stumbling upon an oasis. They were people who knew where the water would be, how long it might last, and how to navigate between these life-sustaining hubs. This evidence fundamentally reshapes the map of early human dispersal out of Africa. For decades, the Arabian Peninsula was viewed as a formidable barrier, a hyper-arid desert that would have blocked or severely limited movement. The Nephod footprints argue the opposite. They reveal Arabia not as a wall, but as a periodically open door, a lush corridor that beckoned during wet climatic phases. This turns the narrative of a single, triumphant exodus into a story of pulses. Imagine groups of early modern humans looking east from Africa, seeing not a wasteland but a green horizon. They would have followed the rains, moving into a landscape rich with game and freshwater, settling around these lakes for generations. Then, as the climate cycled back to aridity, the lakes would shrink, the grasslands would brown, and the human populations would either retreat, adapt to a drier way of life, or perhaps perish. This ebb and flow of green phases created a revolving door between continents, allowing for multiple waves of expansion and interaction over tens of thousands of years. The footprints near the water's edge are a signature of resilience. They mark the campsites and daily routines of people who mastered this fluctuating environment, whose entire cultural rhythm was tied to the coming and going of the rains. Their presence in Arabia during these windows proves a breathtaking adaptability, an ability to seize opportunity on a continental scale. These ghostly steps in the sand do more than add a new location to the human story. They introduce a powerful new character, climate itself, as the director of our ancient migrations. They show that the path out of Africa was not a one-way road paved with determination, but a green highway that appeared and vanished with the shifting skies, a route walked by many and forgotten by time until the desert chose to reveal their passing. The green highways of Arabia were corridors of life, but some of the most profound human steps were taken not beneath open skies, but in the absolute dark, in the company of giants. France's Chauvet Cave is a cathedral of Paleolithic art, its walls alive with charging rhinos, prowling lions, and herds of horses painted with breathtaking vitality. Yet on the floor of this sacred gallery, a quieter, more intimate story is written in the clay. Here, the massive, five-clawed paw prints of cave bears are pressed deep into the soft sediment. And among them, sometimes crossing their paths or pressed into the same mud, are the smaller, familiar prints of human feet. This is not a clean canvas claimed solely by artists. This is a shared space, a palimpsest of different inhabitants. To walk those chambers today is to feel the weight of that coexistence. Imagine carrying a flickering torch made of resinous pine, the only pool of light in an ocean of black. The air is cool and damp, smelling of earth and mineral water. Your light dances across the wall, suddenly illuminating the towering form of a cave bear, painted in ochre and charcoal, muscles coiled with power. And there, on the floor by your foot, is the actual track of such a creature, a print so large your own foot fits inside it. The human footprints discovered at Chauvet are almost always found in association with two things: the smudges of torch marks wiped against the wall to clean the flame, and the proximity to breathtaking artistic panels. This is no coincidence. It tells us that people were not just passing through. They were coming here with purpose, to create and to witness creation, navigating a space that was, at least seasonally, a bear's den. The overlapping tracks do not necessarily mean humans and bears stood face to face in the gloom, though the possibility adds a palpable tension to the scene. More likely, they used the cave at different times, perhaps humans venturing in during the bear's dormant season. But the awareness was absolute. To paint a bear on the wall while standing beside its track is an act of profound observation and perhaps reverence. It suggests these artists were not simply depicting animals from memory, but studying them in their very homes, absorbing their power and presence. The choice to place art in these specific chambers, often deep and difficult to access, feels deliberate. Were these spaces selected because the bears had sanctified them with their presence? Did the act of painting amidst the signs of the cave's most powerful resident become part of the ritual, a way to channel or commune with that raw, untamed force of nature? This mingling of traces fundamentally changes how we see these deep caves. they were not exclusive human temples from which the natural world was banished. They were liminal spaces, thresholds between the familiar world above and an underworld realm below, a realm shared with other powerful beings. The human footprints at Chauvet mark a path of conscious engagement with that shared world. They walked where the bears walked, not to conquer the space, but to enter into a dialogue with it, translating the awe and danger of that coexistence into enduring images of beauty and power on the walls. This complex relationship, written in tracks and pigment, hints that our ancestors saw themselves not as separate from the wild, but as participants in a conversation with it, a conversation that began with a careful, respectful step in the dark. The dialogue with giants in the dark was an act of profound observation, a skill now amplified by tools our ancestors could never have dreamed of. Our journey across 20 landscapes ends not with a final print, but with a new way of seeing. The future of footprint science is being written in laser light and microscopic detail. Ground-penetrating LiDAR, a technology that uses pulsed lasers to map surfaces hidden beneath vegetation or shallow soil, is acting like an X-ray for entire landscapes. From the air, it can reveal the subtle topography of ancient lakebeds and river channels, highlighting patterns invisible to someone walking on the ground. This is how researchers are finding promising new sites without ever breaking the earth, scanning vast areas to pinpoint where the past might be preserved just below our feet. Once a potential trackway is located, the analysis begins with a precision that would astonish the pioneers of this field. Three-dimensional photogrammetry involves taking hundreds of overlapping photographs from every angle. Specialized software then stitches these images together to create a hyper-detailed digital model of the footprint, a perfect virtual copy that can be rotated, measured, and analyzed without risking damage to the original. This digital model allows scientists to do something extraordinary. They can study the pressure distribution within the print itself. By analyzing the depth and shape of the impression millimeter by millimeter, they can reconstruct the creator's gait, estimate their speed, and even make educated guesses about their body mass. A footprint becomes a biomechanical signature, but the innovation goes deeper still, literally into the grain of the sediment. Researchers are now turning to microscopic analysis of the footprint infill, the material that filled the track after it was made. This sediment can contain a hidden archive of the moment. Pollen grains reveal what plants were nearby. Fragments of ancient diatoms or algae tell the story of the water body. Perhaps most fascinating, scientists can analyze the fossilized remains of microbial communities, the tiny organisms that immediately began colonizing the fresh impression. The types of microbes present can indicate the temperature, the moisture level, and even the nutrient content of the soil, painting an exquisitely detailed portrait of the microenvironment at the exact time someone walked there. This suite of technologies is transforming known sites into new sources of information. At White Sands, LiDAR helps map the full extent of the trackways across the vast basin. At Happisburgh, photogrammetry captured the fleeting prints in perfect detail before the sea erased them forever. And in laboratories around the world, sediment samples from these sites are yielding environmental stories as rich as the footprints themselves. The promise is a coming flood of new data from both re-examined locations and unexplored territories. What undiscovered processions lie beneath the grasslands of the Serengeti, or sealed under layers of ash in Central Asia? How many more family groups, hunts, and solitary journeys are waiting for the right combination of technology and curiosity to bring them back into the light? The future of this science is clear. It is not merely about finding more footprints. It is about learning to read the ones we have and the ones we will find with a clarity that turns a simple impression into a biography written in stone, mud, and time. The ground beneath us has always been talking. Now we are finally learning to hear every word. These silent pathways do more than rewrite a timeline. they reframe the very question of what it means to be human. Every impression left in the mud, from the careful steps on a volcanic slope to the playful skip of a child, speaks of a mind at work. It is a mind assessing terrain, a mind bound to others in a social group, a mind driven by curiosity or need to move from one point to another. This intention, this conscious navigation of the world, is what we encounter in each fossilized track. When you look at the Laetoli Trail, you are not just seeing evidence of bipedalism. You are witnessing two individuals choosing to walk together. The Happisburgh prints show a family unit navigating a cold, new land, their very togetherness a survival strategy. Even the solitary footprint on Calvert Island hints at a vast, unspoken knowledge of coastal currents and safe harbors. These are not the actions of instinctual creatures merely reacting to their environment. They are the signatures of beings with agency, with foresight, and with stories we can only begin to guess. This collective testimony forces a profound shift in perspective. For so long, human history has been told as a singular, ascending narrative, a spotlight following Homo sapiens to center stage. These 20 trackways dissolve that spotlight into a constellation. They reveal a world where our own lineage was just one branch among many, sharing landscapes with other kinds of humans, from the robust Paranthropus at Koobi, Fora, to the pioneering Homo antecessor in Britain. Our story is not a solo, it is a chorus, often harmonizing, sometimes competing, but always part of a wider ecological symphony that included mammoths, ground sloths, and cave bears. This deeply challenges any anthropocentric view, the idea that history revolves solely around us. Instead, we see that we emerged within a web of life, our fate tangled with the climate, the migrations of animals, and the presence of our evolutionary cousins. The footprints make deep time feel shockingly intimate. A million years is an abstraction, a number too vast to hold in your mind, but the drag of a child's heel in the Australian clay, or the handprint beside a footprint on an Italian volcano, collapses that distance instantly. These are not artifacts, they are moments. They translate geological epochs into human scale, into the breath and effort of a single afternoon. This immediacy changes our relationship with the past. Those who walked these paths are no longer vague concepts. They become individuals whose experiences we can almost touch. This tangible connection invites a humbling question about our own identity. When we see the modern human gait in the steps of Homo erectus at Ileret, or recognize the social care in supporting a one-legged companion at Willandra lakes, what are we truly seeing? It suggests that the core qualities we often claim as uniquely ours, exploration, community, resilience in the face of adversity, may be far older than our species. They may be foundational threads woven deep into the fabric of our entire lineage, expressed in different forms across different branches of the family tree. The drive that sent a family onto the chilly shores of ancient Britain may be the same drive that propelled sailors across oceans millennia later. The compassion that kept pace with a disabled member of the group is a recognizable human compassion. These footprints, therefore, are not just records of where we went. They are mirrors reflecting back the enduring essence of the journey itself. They tell us that history is not a fixed line pointing inevitably to us, but a vast, intricate tapestry. It is woven from countless individual journeys, each step a choice, each path a story, and each story a reminder that we are both inheritors of an ancient legacy and fleeting participants in a continuum that will long outlast us. This realization is the final gift of the tracks, a quiet call for humility and a boundless source of wonder. From the ash of Laetoli to the mud of white sands, these 20 fossilized footprints are far more than mere impressions. They are profound challenges etched in stone, clay, and sand. Each one is a quiet rebellion against the textbooks, a direct confrontation with the comfortable narratives we have built about our own past. They do not ask for a minor footnote or a slight adjustment. They demand a complete redrawing of the maps, a fundamental reconsideration of the timelines, and above all, a deeper, more imaginative empathy for the lives of our ancestors and ancient relatives. These tracks transform history from a static record into a living, breathing discipline, one that is constantly being rewritten by the very ground beneath our feet. Think about the scale of this change. A single set of prints on a Greek island pushes the origins of bipedalism back by 2 million years and places it on a different continent entirely. A child's footprint in British Columbia whispers of a coastal migration along a highway now drowned by the sea. The playful steps of a teenager in New Mexico prove humans lived in the Americas a staggering 7,000 years before the story said they arrived. Each of these discoveries began as a simple mark in the earth, yet each one possessed the power to overturn decades of established theory. They remind us that the most foundational truths of our shared story are not set in stone. They are written in much more fragile materials that wait for a curious eye, a storm tide, or a shifting dune to reveal their secrets. This journey through deep time is ultimately a story about connection. It connects us through the universal act of walking, to a mother carrying her child across an Ice Age lakebed, to a family supporting a one-legged companion in ancient Australia, to an artist walking in sacred darkness beside the tracks of a cave bear. These are not abstract hominins, they are individuals whose choices, whose struggles, and whose moments of care are preserved with heartbreaking clarity. They show us that the core qualities we cherish, resilience in the face of a changing world, the bonds of community, the drive to explore the unknown, are not modern inventions. They are ancient legacies etched step by step into the very path of our becoming. So let these ancient steps inspire in you two things. First, a boundless curiosity about the past, a willingness to question the stories we think we know. And second, a profound respect for the fragile, fleeting evidence that remains. These footprints are miracles of preservation, windows that opened for a geological instant, allowing us a glimpse before closing again. Their survival is a gift, and their message is a call to keep looking, to keep questioning. Which of these footprint stories resonated most deeply with you? Was it the family on the chilly British shore, the artist in the deep cave, or the impossible early arrival in the Americas? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us continue the conversation. If this exploration into the mysteries of our past has intrigued you, subscribe for more journeys to the edges of history and understanding. And remember, the next world-altering discovery, the next footprint that rewrites our story, might be lying just beneath our feet at this very moment, waiting for the tide to recede or the wind to blow.